I'm sitting here looking at the front deck of my boat this morning, and I realized just how much I use a braid to fluorocarbon leader on a lot of my rods. This is something that, 8-9 years ago, I didn't do at all. And I think there's a lot of guys that still don't use a braid to fluorocarbon leader. Maybe they don't like to tie that knot, whatever it may be. But today I want to tell you kind of when and where I like to use braid to fluoro. So stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. This video is brought to you by sportsmansoutfitters.com. It seems like no matter what time of the year is, you can find some of the best deals at Sportsman's Outfitters on your favorite lures. I love the people there. I love their customer service. I love Sportsman's Outfitters. And right now they're having a Father's Day sale. So you can save a lot of money on some of your favorite lures, the Bruin ELS reel, even coolers. So if you would like to help support the Bass Fishing HQ channel, click those links down below in the description. It almost seems that fishing braid to fluorocarbon is almost a controversial subject in bass fishing, almost a touchy subject. It seems that guys who like straight fluorocarbon are all about straight fluorocarbon, and guys who like braid to fluorocarbon are all about it, and there's no better way. And I'm just going to acknowledge that everybody does something a little bit different in bass fishing. And as long as you are getting the same amount of bites as your other friends who may be doing something different, and you're putting those fish in the boat or on the shoreline if you're a bank fisherman, then keep doing it your way, whether that's straight braid, straight fluorocarbon, braid to fluorocarbon, whatever it may be. Now in today's video, I'm gonna tell you why I like that braid to fluorocarbon, also braid to monofilament in certain situations. But if it doesn't work for you or you do not like it, then just stick to what you've been doing. Now, the first place that I really started using braid to fluorocarbon a lot was anytime that I am fishing with a spinning rod and reel. For me, fishing a braid to fluorocarbon leader on my spinning rod and reel was really kind of a game changer because I use a spinning rod a lot. I fish a lot for smallmouth and I do a ton of finesse fishing where using a spinning rod is necessary. And I can remember back in the day, back probably 8, 9, 10 years ago when I was using straight fluorocarbon all the time, I remember spooling up that fluorocarbon a lot, especially through the summer months when I was doing a lot of finesse fishing. I was always putting fresh fluorocarbon line on there because I wanted to have a full spool and I wanted to have fresh line so that when I was fishing tournaments, I wouldn't break that line. Now, with that being said, I went through several spools, a lot of fluorocarbon every single summer, and we all know that fluorocarbon is pretty expensive. So switching over to braid to fluorocarbon, where I can just tie on a fluorocarbon leader every time I go out, has saved me a ton of money. I mean, this braid here I put on at the start of this year. This braid right here, I actually put this on at the start of last year. So for me, just the cost savings of braid to fluorocarbon on a spinning rod is well worth it. Now, although that is one huge advantage of braid to fluorocarbon on your spinning reel, the other huge advantage is line twist. We all hate dealing with line twist. I don't care who you are or how long you've been fishing. If you've picked up a spinning rod and reel, you've dealt with line twist. It is a huge issue. It leads to a lot of frustration when you're out there fishing. And a lot of guys think that they can solve their line twist issues, especially if they're using straight fluorocarbon, by the way that they spool their line on the reel. And here's the thing, if you are catching a lot of fish with your spinning rod and reel, every time that fish pulls line out, every time you hear your drag singing like that, that is creating a line twist. So the more fish that you catch, the more line that they pull out, you are constantly twisting that line. The big thing is that switching over to braid to fluorocarbon is really going to eliminate a lot of those line twist issues. Braid can actually twist a lot more without it hindering the line in comparison to fluorocarbon. If fluorocarbon twists a lot, then you're gonna start to see those little twists and twirls in your line, and that's what really causes all those bird nest issues that we see with a spinning rod. Now, there used to be a few select techniques that I did like a straight fluoro on a spinning rod, and one of those was a jerkbait. But as you can see here, I have my jerkbait on a bait cast rod and reel. And the truth is that jerkbaits are a lot better than they used to be. Bait cast reels are a lot better than they used to be. Nowadays, most jerkbaits have some sort of weight transfer system in them that allows you to cast them extremely far even with a bait cast reel. And bait cast reels just continue to get smoother and better and allow you to cast lighter baits even easier. So now I fish a jerkbait 100% of the time with a bait cast rod. I have no problem going down to 10-pound test, down to 8-pound test on my bait cast rod and throwing that jerkbait. Now, speaking of bait casters, let's talk about the situations that I really like a braid to fluorocarbon leader on my bait cast rod and reel. Something that I have started doing a lot is every time I am flipping and pitching a bait, whether that is a soft plastic or a jig, I really like to use a braid to fluorocarbon leader. I like 40-pound braid to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. Every now and then it'll be 25, most of the time it's 20, and always an FG knot. This is something that has really kind of become a little bit more popular over the last couple of years. I really think Seth Feider, a professional bass fisherman, was the guy who really kind of put this on the map. There was a couple of tournaments where Seth Feider did extremely well flipping with braid to fluorocarbon leader, and I think several anglers started to take note of that, especially guys who are like flippers and pitchers, guys like Hunter Shyrock. You see those guys starting to make the move to using a braid to fluorocarbon leader. And one of the biggest advantages to flipping and pitching with braid to fluorocarbon is that you do not need to use as big or as heavy as a rod as you used to with straight fluorocarbon. I used to flip and pitch soft plastics and jigs with 20-pound fluorocarbon line and a 7-foot 6-inch heavy action rod. Now, when I switched to braid to fluorocarbon, I was able to step down my rod to a 7-foot 3-inch medium heavy rod. And the reason that you actually want to step down when it comes to using your rod is because using braid, there is zero stretch in that system. So if you are flipping and pitching and it is really close quarters, you know, having a 7-foot 6-inch heavy power rod, it's actually too much for the fish. Because you are so close to that fish, when you go to set the hook with that heavy rod, there's really no give. You have a heavy rod and you have almost straight braid, and what it tends to do is actually rip a big hole in that fish's mouth. And when you rip big holes in that fish's mouth, that's what causes you to lose fish, because then they come up, they jump, they swing that bait around and it flies out. Now, by stepping down to that 7-foot 3-inch medium heavy, the give now really happens in the rod. I can still set the hook kind of in a similar way that I used to, but my rod is really taking up a lot of that energy because it's not as heavy as a rod. There's some give in this rod. Another huge advantage to using braid to fluoro with a lighter rod is that if you fish a 7-foot 6-inch heavy all day long, you can actually really feel that in your wrist by the end of the day. And using that lighter rod like this 7.3 medium heavy, honestly, you do not even feel this thing. It's light as a feather in your hand. You still have all the power that you did with that 7.6 heavy, but it's a lot lighter system. It doesn't have as much wear and tear on the body. Now, the one place that I will not use braid to fluorocarbon is actually when I'm fishing around docks. When I'm fishing around docks, I like straight 20-pound fluorocarbon. When you skip a jig or soft plastic way up underneath of a dock, I do not want my knot way up underneath that dock. I do not want my knot to be hitting pylons and stuff like that as I'm bringing fish out. That's gonna be a no-go. Another place that you may see this same thing is if you are flipping and pitching really deep trees. But besides that, I'm going to use braid to fluorocarbon anytime I am flipping and pitching. The next place that I always use braid to fluorocarbon is anytime I'm fishing a topwater bait. Now, probably one of the biggest advantages that I see to using that braid to mono on my topwater is getting a solid hook in the fish at a long distance. I think one of the best ways that you can catch fish on topwaters is getting that bait as far away from the boat as possible. I think that is your best chance at catching big bass on a topwater. And the problem with using straight mono is if you make a long bomb cast and that bass blows up on that thing within a few twitches and you set the hook, mono has a tremendous amount of stretch in it. So when you go to set that hook, all you're really doing is pulling and stretching that line out. And so therefore, you do not always get a great hook in that fish. But when you are using braid with your topwaters, getting a hook in that fish, even if it's 125 feet away from the boat, is the exact same as if that fish is 10 feet away from that boat. There's really no difference. Now again, because you are using braid, like we talked about with flipping and pitching, you want to make sure you have the right rod. You know, if you were using straight monofilament, there's a lot of give there, which really does help you, especially when you're fighting a fish close to the boat, because if that fish pulls really hard, there's some give in that line to help keep those hooks in. Now, with braid, there is no give. There's no stretch at all. So your rod has to be where that give happens. So when I'm using braid with topwaters, I like more of a moderate bending rod. This is a little bit more of a parabolic bending rod, so that if that fish digs right at the side of the boat, your rod is going to give. That helps you to keep those fish hooked. So those are my favorite situations to use braid to fluoro or braid to mono. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about is how to tie these braid to fluorocarbon knots. And the knots that I like are the FG knot and the Crazy Alberto knot. And I actually made a full video that discusses not only those knots, but all the knots that you need to know when it comes to bass fishing. And I'm gonna leave a link for that right here. This is a really cool video. I brought Mikey Balls on, Hunter Shyrock, Tyler Anderson to show you how to tie the best knots in bass fishing. So watch this video next. Also subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.